Good evening, and welcome back, sleepless historians. Have you ever wondered why almost every civilization on Earth once spoke of dragons? From the mist-covered temples of China to the cold stone castles of medieval Europe, to the sun-baked plains of Mesopotamia, everywhere people told stories of great serpents and winged beasts. They might have called them dragons, or lang, or naga, but beneath the different names, the shape was always familiar: long, scaled, powerful, a creature born from chaos itself. How could this be? Did our ancestors see the same thing, the same shadow across the ages? Or is the dragon something deeper, a reflection of something we all carry within us? Before we begin, if you're listening from a different country, tell me your country and the time where you are down below in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's tuning in from. And if this story helps you relax, don't forget to subscribe and share it with someone who loves a good bedtime tale. Your support is honestly what motivates me to keep creating these magical and sometimes spooky stories for everyone. Tonight, we follow that question slowly, not to hunt the dragon, but to understand it. Because dragons are not just monsters, they are mirrors, showing us what ancient people feared, what they revered, and how they tried to make sense of a wild and unpredictable world. Our journey begins, as many stories do, at the very dawn of civilization, in the lands between the Tigris and Euphrates. Long before there were knights, or castles, or even kings, there was Sumer. And in Sumerian myth, the universe itself began with the body of a dragon. They called her Tiamat, the mother of chaos, a vast cosmic serpent that swam through the dark waters before creation. When the gods of order rose against her, they fought not just a monster, but the very embodiment of untamed nature. And when they finally struck her down, the world was made from her remains. To the Sumerians, the first dragon was not evil. She was everything that came before us. She was the sea, the storm, the unknown. As centuries passed, this idea of a cosmic serpent who represents both life and destruction drifted westward and eastward, carried by trade, by migration, by story, across deserts and mountains, into Egypt, into India, into the farthest corners of the ancient world. And somehow each civilization saw in that story something that felt true to them. In Egypt, a serpent swallowed the sun each night. In China, a dragon brought the rains that fed the fields. In Europe, one guarded treasures beneath the earth. Different worlds, different meanings, but always the same shape.
So, what is a dragon, really? A memory of ancient creatures long vanished? A symbol for chaos? Or simply the oldest dream we've ever shared? In the stillness of ancient nights, our ancestors looked into the dark and imagined something alive, something vast, something powerful enough to explain both creation and fear. That imagination gave birth to the dragon, and that imagination is where our story begins. Before there were kingdoms, before there were empires, there was a land of rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates. Here in what we now call Mesopotamia, the world's first cities rose from clay and water. Uruk, Nippur, Babylon, and with them came stories, stories written not on paper, but pressed into wet clay with a reed stylus 5,000 years ago. Among those stories was one of the oldest known myths about creation, the Enu Elish. In that story, before the heavens, before the earth, there was only water, and in those waters moved two beings, Apsu, the sweet waters of the rivers, and Tiamat, the salt waters of the sea. Together they were the parents of everything, the first gods. But as their children grew restless, noise filled the depths of the world. The younger gods quarreled and fought, and the peace of the deep was broken. Apsu wished to destroy them, but Tiamat, the mother, hesitated, until the day came when even she was stirred to wrath. From her body she birthed monsters, dragons, serpent men, creatures made of chaos and storm. And when she rose up against the gods, the universe trembled. No one could face her except Marduk, the young god of the winds. Armed with his storm and his net, he met Tiamat in battle. They clashed across the heavens, wind and water, storm and sea. And when his arrow struck her, it pierced her heart. Then, with calm precision, he split her body in two. With one half, he made the heavens. With the other, he shaped the earth. Creation born from destruction. Order carved out of chaos. It is one of the oldest stories ever told, and perhaps the first to imagine a dragon as the embodiment of the wild. Tiamat was not just a monster. She was the world before the world, the raw, formless energy that had to be tamed for life to exist. And maybe even then, people understood something deeper, that chaos and creation are never truly separate. that every civilization is built upon the body of the dragon it has conquered. When later cultures, the Babylonians, the Assyrians, retold this story, they gave Tiamat new shapes. Sometimes she was a sea serpent coiling around the edge of the world. Sometimes a winged beast with lion's feet and eagle's claws. But always she was vast, female, and ancient, older than any god that dared to defy her.
And perhaps this is why her image endured. Because deep in our memories, there is something both terrifying and sacred about the ocean before light. The people of Mesopotamia looked upon that endless horizon and saw the face of their goddess, half creator, half storm, the first dragon. It is here, in this ancient land, that the dragon story begins. From this first serpent of chaos, later cultures would borrow, changing the dragon into something new. In Egypt, the serpent would become a god's eternal enemy. In India, a symbol of rivers and rebirth. And in China, a bringer of rain and harmony. But all of them, in some quiet way, remembered Tiamat, the mother of monsters, and the first dream of the dragon. Far to the west of Mesopotamia, beyond the dry hills and the shifting dunes, another civilization watched the horizon and told stories about what lay beyond the sun. This was ancient Egypt, a land where the river never stopped flowing, and where the people believed that every night the sun itself died. They watched as the light sank beneath the horizon, and they wondered, where did it go? Their answer was both simple and deeply cosmic. They said that when the sun set, it entered the Duat, the Egyptian underworld. There it traveled on a great solar boat, sailing through rivers of darkness, guided by the god Ra. But the journey was never safe, because in the depths of that night river, a vast serpent waited. His name was Apep, or Apophis, as the Greeks later called him. He was enormous, a serpent so long that his coils encircled the world. His scales were black like the deepest night. And every evening, as the sun passed through the underworld, Apep rose from the shadows to devour it. To the Egyptians, this was not just a bedtime story. It was the rhythm of the cosmos. Each dawn was a victory, every sunset a descent into danger. Each night, Ra and his companions fought Apep. They struck him with spears of light. They bound him with chains of fire. Priests on earth even recited spells to help the sun god win the battle. And when the first rays of light returned in the morning, people knew Ra had survived. The serpent had failed. For one more day. Apep was not simply evil, he was necessary. Without him, the world would have no sunrise, no rhythm, no story to tell. Because every god needs an opposite. Every order
needs its chaos. Every dawn needs its night. In this way, Apep was like Tiamat, a cosmic serpent that represented everything wild, unpredictable, and endless. But while Tiamat's body became the world, Apep was kept outside of it, forever battling, forever waiting. He was not slain, not truly. He could never die, for night always returns. And so, as the Nile flowed, and the stars moved across the desert sky, the people of Egypt lived with that rhythm. Light and dark, Ra and Apep, life and death. To them, the serpent was not just a monster. He was the pulse of time itself. Some scholars believe that this nightly struggle influenced later ideas of dragons and demons, the eternal enemy beneath the world, the beast that must be fought again and again. In Egypt, the dragon was not a hoarder of gold, nor a creature to be slain by heroes. He was cosmic balance, a symbol that every victory, even the sunrise, is never permanent. When we think of dragons now, creatures to be conquered, we forget that once they were woven into the very rhythm of existence. From Tiamat's ocean to Apep's underworld, these ancient serpents marked the boundaries between light and dark, between order and the unknown. But east of Egypt, in a land of forests, monsoons, and sacred rivers, a new kind of dragon was being imagined, one that was not a destroyer, but a protector.
Far to the east of Egypt, beyond deserts and mountains, a new land dreamed of serpents, but not as monsters. Here, in ancient India, the dragon became something sacred. The people who lived along the Indus and the Ganges knew the river as both life and mystery. It gave water, food, and renewal, but it could also flood, sweep away homes, and disappear again into stillness. And from this rhythm of life and danger arose the Nagas, the serpent spirits of India. The word Naga simply means serpent, but to the ancient Indians it meant far more than that. The Nagas were divine beings, half human, half snake, guardians of rivers, lakes, and hidden treasures beneath the earth. They were beautiful and powerful. They could bless or curse. And unlike the dragons of the West, they were not symbols of evil. They were part of nature's balance, mysterious, wise, and eternal. In Hindu mythology, the Nagas lived in a realm called Patala, a luminous underworld of jewels and flowing waters. It was not a place of punishment, but a sacred space beneath the world filled with light, music, and peace. Their king was Shesha, the endless serpent, so vast that he coiled himself beneath the universe and held up the heavens on his 1,000 hoods. And when the world is destroyed, Shesha will uncoil and the cosmos will dissolve back into water. Another great Naga was Vasuki, the serpent wrapped around Mount Mandara during the churning of the ocean of milk, a myth
that speaks of gods and demons joining forces to stir the sea of creation. They used Vasuki as their rope, pulling back and forth until the ocean produced wonders, the moon, the goddess Lakshmi, and the nectar of immortality itself. It's a myth of unity and renewal, of chaos transformed into creation, and again, a serpent at its heart. In these stories, the serpent is not destruction, it is continuity. It is the circle of death and rebirth, the never-ending flow of water and life. In their world, to fear the serpent was to forget that life itself depends on the waters they guard. From here, our journey continues further east, to the mountains and valleys of ancient China, where dragons were never monsters at all, but symbols of balance, wisdom, and divine power.
In the vast lands of ancient China, the dragon was not a monster to be feared, but a spirit to be revered. Here, among mist-covered mountains and rivers that flowed like silver threads, the dragon, or Long, was a creature of the heavens. It did not crawl through the dirt, nor guard dark caverns filled with gold. Instead, it danced through clouds and storms, its body winding like the wind itself. To the Chinese, the dragon was the breath of the world, the force behind rain, fertility, and balance. It was said that when the dragon rose, rain would fall. When it slept, drought would follow. And so the people prayed to dragons, not with fear, but with respect. They believed that the emperor himself was descended from dragons, that his authority, his very presence, was proof of the creature's blessing. If you've ever seen the Chinese dragon dance, its flowing silk body, its bright eyes and long whiskers, you can feel a trace of that reverence, an echo of something ancient, something both joyful and powerful. In early myths, there were many kinds of dragons. Some lived in the sky, bringing rain and wind. Some ruled the oceans, guarding coral palaces deep below the waves. And others dwelled in mountain springs, keepers of rivers and clouds. But all shared a common purpose: to maintain harmony. For in the Chinese view of the world, the balance of yin and yang, the dragon was yang, the bright, creative, and masculine energy of heaven. Its counterpart, the phoenix, was yin, the gentle, receptive, and feminine force of the earth. Together, they formed a cycle, a dance of balance that echoed through all life. Unlike the dragons of Europe, who breathed fire and devoured nights, the Chinese dragon breathed clouds and thunder. Its roar was the sound of distant rain. Its scales shimmered with the colors of dawn. Sometimes it appeared as a serpent with antlers, a lion's mane, and the claws of an eagle. Other times it was formless, a streak of light, a sudden storm over the mountains. To see a dragon in the sky was to see the power of nature itself, the unseen made visible. Many stories tell of emperors who dreamed of dragons before they rose to power, a sign from heaven, a whisper that destiny was near. In this way, the dragon became a symbol of transformation, of growth, of ascension, of the bridge between earth and heaven. Even today, you can see the dragon carved on temples, painted on scrolls, woven into silk robes. Its image flows through 5,000 years of art, a creature of power and peace. And perhaps that is why the Chinese dragon has never vanished. It was never a fear to be destroyed, but a reminder to live in balance, to respect the forces we cannot control, and to find harmony within them. From the calm rivers of India to the skies of ancient China, the dragon has transformed, from destroyer to guardian, from chaos to order, from fear to wisdom. But in the West, the dragon's story took another path. It became darker, heavier, and deeply human.
As we drift westward, the dragon changes once again. In the east, it soared through clouds, a bringer of rain and life. But in the west, it descended into shadow. Here in the lands of ancient Greece and medieval Europe, the dragon became something darker. A test, a symbol of pride, greed, and fear. In Greek mythology, the word drakon meant simply serpent. But these serpents were not ordinary. They were born from divine blood, guardians of sacred places, and enemies of heroes. One of the earliest was Python, a great serpent who lived at Delphi. He guarded the oracle of the earth goddess Gaia. But when the young god Apollo came seeking a home for his temple, he slew the serpent and built his shrine upon its resting place. From that moment, Delphi became the voice of Apollo, the god of light and order, speaking from the bones of the old dragon. It is an old pattern, isn't it? The hero of order defeats the creature of chaos. A story as old as Tiamat, as ancient as the sea itself. Another dragon, Ladon, guarded the golden apples of the Hesperides, the fruit of immortality. And it was Heracles, the great hero, who came to slay him. Then there was the Hydra, a serpent with many heads, each one growing back when cut. Only by burning the stumps could Heracles destroy it. The Hydra lived in a swamp, half in water, half in darkness, a perfect symbol of chaos itself. These myths carried a lesson. The dragons were not random beasts, but forces to be faced, manifestations of greed, danger, or forbidden power. As the centuries passed, the dragon crept northward into the cold mists of Europe. There its image grew larger, its wings wider, its fire brighter. No longer a serpent of rivers, but a beast of caverns and flames. In early Christian tales, the dragon became the enemy of saints. Saint George, riding upon his white horse, pierced the dragon's heart to save a village and a maiden. It was not just a story of bravery, but of faith conquering darkness, a retelling of Ra and Apep, of Marduk and Tiamat, reimagined through new eyes. The dragon had now become sin itself, the embodiment of temptation and chaos. But in some corners of Europe, older memories lingered. The Norse told of Fafnir, a man transformed into a dragon by greed for gold. He guarded his hoard until a hero, Sigurd, drove a sword through his heart. And as the dying dragon spoke, he warned the young warrior that greed would consume him too. The dragon of the West was not just an enemy, it was a mirror, a reflection of human desire,
of the hunger for power, of the fear that our own creations might one day devour us. Even in Beowulf, one of the oldest English epics, the dragon was not evil for evil's sake. It was ancient, weary, a creature disturbed by men who stole its treasure. Beowulf slays the dragon, but dies in the process. A quiet reminder that every victory over chaos comes with a cost. So, from the myths of Greece to the legends of Europe, the dragon became something deeply human, a symbol of the battles within the soul. To conquer the dragon was to conquer fear, pride, and desire. But to destroy it completely was to forget the ancient truth that chaos and creation are born together.
For thousands of years, humans looked upon the earth and saw mystery. A shell embedded in stone, a bone larger than any beast they knew, a skull with fangs curved like moons. Each discovery whispered of creatures long gone, and stories began to form in the silence. In ancient times, there were no words for fossil, no understanding of extinction or of creatures from distant ages. To the farmer who uncovered a massive rib bone, it was simple, proof that something huge once lived here, something with power, something beyond imagining. And so the world filled with dragons. In China, long before modern science, fossils were known as dragon bones. They were ground into powder and used in medicine, believed to hold spiritual strength. To find a dragon bone was to touch a fragment of heaven. Villagers would unearth enormous vertebrae, the remains of long extinct creatures, perhaps dinosaurs, perhaps prehistoric mammals, and carry them to apothecaries. No one could have known that these bones were millions of years old, but the imagination filled in what science could not: a body, a face, a story, a creature that flew through clouds and slept beneath the mountains. In ancient Greece, something similar happened. Travelers in the north of the Aegean found bones buried in the rock, gigantic femurs, great skulls with tusks and teeth. They believed they had discovered the remains of heroes and monsters from the age of gods. Later, the philosopher Herodotus wrote of winged serpents in the deserts of Arabia, a story he said came from the bones he had seen with his own eyes. Perhaps he saw the skeleton of a fossilized pterosaur, perhaps just the bones of a crocodile, bleached white by centuries of sun. But the mind, seeking pattern, made the leap to legend. In Europe, medieval monks found fossilized remains of mammoths and cave bears. They were called dragon bones as well, and stored in cathedrals as holy relics. One story from the 13th century tells of a town in Austria that displayed the skull of a dragon slain by a saint. Today, we know it was the skull of a woolly rhinoceros, a creature that lived during the Ice Age. But to them, it was confirmation that the dragon legends were true. Even in biblical lands, the deserts whispered of monsters. The book of Job speaks of Leviathan, a sea serpent breathing fire. Scholars believe the story may have come from fossil finds in the hills near the Red Sea, where the bones of ancient whales still rest embedded in the sand. Imagine standing there under a burning sun and finding the vertebrae of a creature longer than any boat, its skull sharp and alien. Wouldn't you, too, believe you had found a dragon? Over time, the pattern becomes clear. Everywhere people found fossils, they told dragon stories. In the caves of China, the cliffs of England, the sands of Egypt, the plains of America.
Long before paleontology, myth was our first science. It was how we explained what we did not understand. And in doing so, it gave shape to awe. Even today, some of the earliest discoveries of dinosaurs were first labeled as dragons. In 1677, an English naturalist described a huge fossilized femur as belonging to a giant reptile. He was closer to the truth than he knew. Centuries later, when the word dinosaur was coined, the dragons of stone finally had their true names. But by then, they had already lived for millennia, not in bone, but in memory. So perhaps the dragon is not only a creature of the mind, but also of the earth itself. A memory buried in rock, a fossil dream, a whisper from the deep past that we shaped into story.
Across continents, across centuries, the dragon remained. Even when names changed, languages evolved, and kingdoms rose and fell, the image of the dragon never truly disappeared. It slipped from one culture to another like a shadow crossing water, reshaping itself to fit the hearts and fears of those who spoke of it. In Mesopotamia, the dragon was chaos, a force that had to be tamed for the world to exist. In China, it was harmony, the balance of heaven and earth. In India, it was cycle, the serpent that sheds its skin, the renewal of life. And in Europe, it became sin, the beast that must be slain for light to triumph. Different faces, different names, but underneath, the same heartbeat. Why then did every civilization dream of dragons? Why do they appear in stories told oceans apart, by people who never met, who shared no language, no map, no scripture? Some say it is coincidence, but myths rarely form by accident. Perhaps dragons come from something deeper, not from fossils or fear, but from the architecture of the human mind. Everywhere people looked at nature and saw that it was both beautiful and terrifying. The same river that watered crops could flood and destroy. The same fire that warmed the hearth could consume an entire village. Nature was alive, powerful, unpredictable. And so the dragon was born, a living symbol of the world's dual nature. To see a dragon was to see the soul of the storm, the mystery of fire, the danger of water, the untamed life that humankind could never truly control. But there is another truth. The dragon is also a reflection of ourselves. Every culture imagined dragons as vast, powerful, intelligent, and often deeply emotional. They hoarded treasures, protected sacred spaces, or tested heroes on their journeys. In each version, they were mirrors of greed, of wisdom, of fear. To fight a dragon was to face the part of oneself that longs for power, that refuses to yield, that hides in the dark places of the heart. Psychologists would later call this the shadow, the hidden, untamed side of the human soul. And so, in myth, the dragon became that shadow made flesh. In stories, heroes did not simply destroy the dragon. They transformed through the act. When Siegfried killed Fafnir, he gained wisdom, but also inherited the curse of greed.
When St. George slew his dragon, he became a symbol of faith. But the dragon's death also marked the fading of older gods. Every victory over the dragon was both a triumph and a loss. And yet, there are stories where the dragon was never slain, where it was befriended, respected, or simply allowed to sleep. In Eastern tales, dragons were teachers, guides of emperors and sages, symbols of balance, not battle. Perhaps these stories hold a wisdom we have forgotten, that harmony is not found in destroying chaos, but in living beside it. The dragon is not only chaos, it is also creation. In the Babylonian myth, Tiamat's body became the world itself, her ribs the sky, her tears the rivers, her breath the wind. In death, she gave birth to order. And in Chinese myth, when the dragon moves, it carries clouds and rain, bringing life wherever it passes. Each myth tells the same story in a different tongue. From destruction comes renewal, from fear, wisdom, from the unknown, understanding. Perhaps that is why the dragon endures. Not because we believe in it, but because we need it. It represents everything that cannot be tamed in the world and in ourselves. Even now we see dragons in our stories, in films, books, dreams. They have changed form again. Some are wise, some are monstrous, some are lonely, waiting beneath mountains of forgotten tales. But always they speak to something ancient inside us, a memory of awe, a reminder that there is still mystery in the world. And when we dream of dragons, perhaps we are not dreaming of beasts, but of balance. The part of us that fears the dark, and the part that reaches for light, meeting in the middle. In every age, we have needed the dragon to explain the unexplainable, to give shape to wonder, to remind us that the unknown is not the enemy, but the beginning of every story.
For thousands of years, people have whispered of dragons.
They carved them on temple stones, painted them on walls and vases, and told their children that these creatures once ruled the world. But perhaps the truth is simpler. Perhaps dragons have always ruled only one kingdom, the kingdom of the human mind. In every age, they have changed shape. In Mesopotamia, they were storms and oceans, the wild chaos from which life began. In China, they were wisdom and power, the rhythm of rain and river, the dance of balance between earth and heaven. In Europe, they became monsters and mirrors, guardians of gold, symbols of the human struggle against darkness. And in every story, they spoke of us, our fears, our dreams, our endless attempt to understand the world we live in. When ancient farmers found fossil bones, they saw dragons. When storms broke over mountains, they heard the beat of dragon wings. When they looked within themselves and felt the pull between courage and fear, they imagined the dragon's heart beating in their own. The dragon became everything, the chaos that destroys and the life that follows after, the danger of desire and the beauty of wonder. To see the dragon clearly is to see that we have never truly escaped it, because we still seek power, we still crave meaning, we still stand between light and dark, trying to make sense of both. The dragon sleeps, but it never dies. It lives in our stories, our symbols, our science and imagination. It lives in the fire of discovery and in the fear of what we might unleash. It lives in the heart of every myth and in the quiet between our breaths. So maybe the real question is not, did dragons ever exist? But why do we need them to? What does it say about us that we keep drawing them, writing them, dreaming of them? Maybe it says that we are creatures of wonder, that even as we learn and measure, we still feel the pull of mystery, the need to name the shadows that move beyond the firelight. Maybe the dragon is that shadow. Maybe it's the reminder that awe is not something to be slain, but something to be understood. And when we close our eyes tonight, somewhere deep within, beneath the noise and the weight of the world, the dragon will still be there, curled in sleep, guarding the oldest dream of all, the dream that the world is still full of things we do not yet understand. It is a peaceful thought to know that mystery endures, that even in our most quiet moments, there are still dragons waiting in the dark, not to harm us, but to remind us to keep looking, to keep wondering, to keep imagining. So,
Rest now. Let the dragons keep their watch. Let them drift through the sky of dreams, silent and eternal. Because in every culture, in every story, they were never just monsters. They were the guardians of the unknown and the keepers of awe. And perhaps that is the true origin of dragons, not in fire, not in bone, but in the endless space between what we know and what we still long to discover.